Hey everyone, I'm Allison Mars. You're watching NBC News Now. Here's what's happening.
It's a great pleasure to welcome Chancellor Merkel back into the White House, where she's been in the Oval Office many times. She's been a great friend. I consider her a personal friend as well as a great friend of the United States.
One last shot. This is probably her last visit to the White House before she retires. So what is German Chancellor Angela Merkel getting into with President Biden today?
We are vigilant in our nation's cybersecurity, and we are working with our allies and other nation states because this is a crime that knows no boundaries.
The first of its kind, the Department of Homeland Security launching a brand new website to fight cyber attacks. But is a government website enough? And we are counting down the days. The Olympics opening ceremony just 1 week away. The Tokyo Games haven't even started, though, and the pandemic's already sidelining some athletes. All right, we start today with Angela Merkel at the White House. NBCNews.com senior White House reporter Shannon Pettypiece is on the North Lawn. Shannon, the two leaders talking about two major threats, climate change and COVID. What did they get into on those fronts?
Well, and they're still meeting right now. We expect the president to hold a press conference here rather shortly. You know, you mentioned climate change, COVID. I'll add another one to the list, China. Germany has a very strong trading relationship with China, as the U.S. does. And there has been concern about getting stuck in the middle of a tug of war between the U.S. and China as that trade war in recent years escalated between the two countries. Biden certainly not on the same track as the Trump administration was with China, but certainly taking a hard line with China. So we can expect the two leaders to try and talk about strategy there and how best to deal with China. On the COVID front, that's another key area where these two countries have a little bit of disagreement going on right now. The U.S. would like to see all patent restrictions lifted related to the COVID-19 vaccine so that production could be scaled up around the world. Angela Merkel, Germany, that is something that they have resisted so far. So another key issue we expect to be on the agenda there.
Another contentious issue, Russia's $11 billion Nord Stream 2 gas pipeline. We know Germany strongly supports it. The White House against completing that pipeline. What are some of the big concerns here, Shannon?
Yeah, this has been an issue going on for years now. There's been concern by the U.S., from the Trump administration, from members of Congress, that this pipeline from Russia to Germany, it stretches some 700 miles, could pose a threat to Russia's neighbors like Ukraine and Poland. There's also a concern that Russia could use this pipeline as a way to sort of wield influence through the supply of natural gas over the rest of Europe. So it is something the Trump administration heavily opposed. The Biden administration has been a bit more sending mixed signals. They waived some sanctions recently on a company that is building this pipeline, but they put some sanctions on some Russian companies as well involved in this. It's a very important project for Germany, something that Germans have wanted to see completed for quite some time. And we can expect to see the German chancellor once more trying to make a push for the U.S. to help lift restrictions so they can get this project done.
Shannon, we've been talking about Angela Merkel's long and illustrious career. She's been to the U.S., 19 times on official visits. Her career has spanned 4 different administrations here in the U.S. With a new chancellor coming in, what is the White House doing to maintain a strong relationship with Germany going forward?
Well, I'm certainly having this meeting today. This is the first meeting in person at the White House with the European leaders. Sends a signal of the importance that the U.S. places on their relationship with Germany. We talked about some of the forward-looking things, but this visit is as much of a farewell tour as it is trying to strengthen relations going forward. This is the 4th U.S. president that Chancellor Merkel has met with. She has been a real stable, consistent presence among the Western allies through quite a tumultuous 16 years while she has been in office. And it remains a big question about who her successor is going to be and who is going to step in and fill that role among the Western allies as sort of the elder statesman once she is gone.
A new chapter of this relationship coming this fall. Shannon, thank you very much.
This has the potential to reduce child poverty in the same way that the Social Security reduced poverty for the elderly.
President Biden calling this a historic day for America. Millions of families getting their very first child tax credit payments today. These new monthly deposits are part of President Biden's American Rescue Plan. So how could they help you? Here's NBC News senior business correspondent Stephanie Rule.
Allison, today's the day. Payments are starting to go out for the expanded child tax credit. This is going to impact almost 90% of children across this country. For families making $150,000 or less, that means you. If you have children ages 6 or below, that's $300 a month. For kids between the ages of 6 to 18, it's $250. Now, traditionally, this money would come once a year when we do our taxes. This is changing. It's going to be a little bit like a universal basic income, that it will come as monthly payments. Another big change is who exactly will be getting it. Now, traditionally, Americans who don't make enough money to even file their taxes should get that money, but they don't have access to it. Now that it's refundable, those payments will be going out directly. If you are not sure if you qualify, you can go to childtaxcredit.gov to look into it. And you can also fill out the forms to make sure you're getting it direct deposit rather than in the mail, because that means you'll get it faster. Now, it is an enormous change. Estimates say that this could lift 50% of children who are currently living in poverty out of poverty. However, it's only short term. As part of the American Rescue Plan, it expires at the end of the year. However, the administration is looking to make it long term as part of the infrastructure plan, but we know that hasn't passed yet. But for now, keep your eye out. $300 a month, that's a lot of money. Allison?
We are coming here to pray the hell out of you. We are coming here to say, Texas, we are going to bring justice to politics, because we want politicians who do justice, love mercy, and walk humbly with God. And until you do justice, love mercy, and walk humbly with God, we're going to pray the hell out of you. We're going to march until the walls come tumbling down, and we're going to speak truth to power. That's why you have these super bad preachers here.
Black clergy coming to pray the hell out of Texas, rallying outside the State House in Austin today, supporting the state's runaway Democrats and their attempts to block restrictive voting laws back home. Those lawmakers have one of their most important meetings to date on Capitol Hill with Senator Joe Manchin. Their goal today to convince the West Virginia Democrat to help pass federal voting rights legislation. NBC News Now correspondent Priscilla Thompson is outside the Texas State House for us in Austin. NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent Garrett Hake is on the Hill, of course. So, Garrett, let's start with you. How did Texas Democrats make their case today?
Well, we understand that they and Joe Manchin largely agreed, in principle at least, on the need to pass some new voting rights legislation. They agreed also that it did not need to be, and perhaps shouldn't be, as expansive as the For the People Act, the original kind of big elections package that was voted down in the Senate recently with unanimous Republican opposition. But what they didn't agree on, and in fact what several of them told me they didn't even broach, was the question of tactically how to do this if they don't bring up the filibuster, the threshold of 60 votes that would be necessary to pass a bill. Manchin opposes changing that rules, and the Texas Democrats who met with him told me they didn't even press him on it. Here's part of our conversation.
We didn't discuss the filibuster.
No.
Not at all?
No.
No. Look, I think enough people will discuss the filibuster with Senator Manchin. Right. Look, it's an elephant sitting in the room. Everybody knows what the deal is. He knows Senate maneuvers and mechanics better than we will. Any of us will know. So we'll leave the tactics up to him. We need to know what the core of it was and what the issues were. And we talked about Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act, which is important to us in Texas.
I can confirm far too many people have talked to Joe Manchin about the filibuster, me being one of them, all of the time. But if you don't talk the tactics of making this change, it's hard to see how these Texas Democrats are going to get something on the timetable they need, which is quite urgent, with that Texas voting law having already passed the Senate and essentially waiting for them when they get back to the House.
Yeah, Garrett, I have to ask you about that, right? Because if they're not talking to him about the filibuster, it seems like in the greater effect, you're not really talking about getting this voting rights legislation passed. Is there any chance that the Texas Dems get what they want out of their extended visit to the Capitol if they don't have that tough talk about the F word that you're so comfortable having with Joe Manchin?
Yeah, look, without those changes, without a change to these rules, it's very difficult to see how any new federal voting rights legislation becomes law, because Republicans are universally opposed to it, and I don't see that changing. But the other thing that these Texas Democrats want, and which they could get, is, in fact, they are getting, just based on this conversation, they are trying to shine a spotlight on this issue. They are trying to make this an issue that they can run on, that they can raise money on, and that they can campaign on in 2022. Texas Democrats had a very small targeted number of seats in which they could have picked up in 2020 to win control of the House in Texas. They failed to do so. That same target is at least theoretically within their reach again. So if they cannot win on this issue today, they at least want to spotlight it and use it to motivate Democrats for whom they might be able to win on it in the future.
This is their third day in D.C. Do we know what their plans are for day 4?
Not specifically. Several of them said they are still trying to meet with Joe Biden. They met with Kamala Harris. Some of them did on their last visit here. Actually, all of them did on this current visit here, now that I think about it. But they want to meet with the president. It's not clear that that's going to happen. They did tell me they have absolutely no plans to return to Texas during this special session. So they could be in D.C. for a while, or perhaps they decide to take this show on the road and travel to some of these other states where they might be able to pressure other lawmakers.
Hey, Garrett, back home, the governor, Republicans have been threatening arrest. I understand we have video of Rep. Beatty getting arrested. What do you know about what happened?
This was a protest that happened today in the Hart Senate Office Building auditorium. The buildings are actually still closed now, so this was something that had to be organized with at least some member support. Presumably, Representative Beatty was involved in that. Again, trying to focus attention on voting rights. A tactical arrest by the U.S. Capitol Police is a tried and true technique to focus attention on an issue.
If the goal this week is to focus attention on issues to get more attention heading towards midterm elections, Garrett, it seems that goal has certainly been achieved, if not federal voting rights just yet. Thank you so much.
You bet.
All right, let's get to Priscilla, who's in Austin outside the State House. Priscilla, that prayer and justice march we were talking about earlier today, it happened right where you're standing. They say they were going to march until the walls come down and lobby state Republicans on voting rights. What's the clergy asking state lawmakers specifically to do? What do they want to see?
Well, they certainly did do a lot of marching today, Allison. They kicked off the day on those South Steps that you see just behind me, praying over first those Texas Democrats who were in Washington, D.C. as they headed in to that meeting with Senator Joe Manchin, and also praying about this voting bill. They do not want Republicans to pass it. Everyone here today in opposition to that. And so they are saying that while the GOP may have the power in the State House, it is God who has the ultimate power. And so they were praying for some sort of intervention there. And that all, of course, happening before they walked inside the Capitol and attempted to meet with many of the Republican lawmakers who remain here, even as there is no quorum in the House. And they were hoping to, of course, speak with those lawmakers about their opposition to these voting bills, how they feel that it would disproportionately impact their communities, particularly Black and brown communities. And I want to play a little bit of some of the prayer that we heard from them earlier today. Take a listen.
We come to you in the name of our resurrected revolutionary, Jesus the Christ, who knows what it means to march on a Capitol. He marched on Jerusalem and turned out the money changers. So we're going to march on Austin, and we're going to turn out anyone engaged in voter suppression.
So, Allison, lots of passionate speeches being given here, both outside and inside those the walls of the State House. The question really is, what impact will it have? We saw those marathon hearings that occurred over the weekend, more than 24 hours debating those bills, yet and still they passed out of committee. The Senate has already passed their version of these bills. But these folks say that while those Texas Democrats are in Washington, D.C. doing the work, they are also going to be here doing everything they can to fight this. Allison?
Priscilla, former Congressman Beto O'Rourke also involved here. He's backing the state Democrats stay in D.C. with a huge fundraising effort and plenty of celebs joining in on that. Who's getting involved and how is that money helping these runaway lawmakers, as we call them now?
Yeah, lots of folks helping in to try to support those lawmakers on their journey in Washington, D.C. We saw Willie Nelson posting a video offering to match up to $5,000 in donations to help support those lawmakers. Former Congressman Beto O'Rourke's PAC, Powered by the People, raising more than $500,000 to support those lawmakers there. And also other celebrities tweeting about this, tweeting out that link to donate, including Jonathan Van Ness of Queer Eye. And so really lots of folks looking to support those Democrats because, of course, they have said they're planning to remain in Washington, D.C. until August 7th, when this special session ends. And that means that they are going to need to pay for hotel rooms and food and buses and transportation. And that costs a lot of money, especially for when you're talking about a group of more than 50 people doing that there. Allison?
You got America's favorite hairstylist involved. That's some pretty big star power there, Priscilla in Austin. We thank you. All right, it's time to check in with NBC News Now correspondent Simone Boyce. You know why she's here, to bring us all the headlines from NBCnews.com, and we're so happy that she is. Hi, Simone.
All right, Allison. Well, today we start in California, where UC Davis is suspending its entire baseball program following allegations of misconduct. The coaching staff is also being put on administrative leave. Now, we don't know exactly what happened here because the school didn't offer up specific details, but they do say that the allegations involve the varsity team. Now, the investigation starts September 20th and will last about 2 months. Well, one day before the anniversary of Gianni Versace's murder, 2 men were found dead in a hotel room that used to be the fashion designer's former residence in South Florida. Housekeeping staff actually found the 2 men, according to Miami Beach police. Now, they did not disclose the cause of death, but an investigation is underway. Now, Versace, of course, was fatally shot just outside of that famed ostentatious mansion 24 years ago. And researchers in the Saginaw Chippewa Indian tribe of Michigan uncovering records involving the deaths of indigenous children that go way beyond the 5 that were documented by the U.S. government. The records show 227 children died at the Mount Pleasant Indian Industrial Boarding School, which closed in 1934. Now, the Interior Secretary recently announced an investigation into, quote, decades of institutionalized, federally funded cultural assimilation that happened in these schools. And some good news. A woman in Pennsylvania is safe after leaving 2 notes in public restrooms and being held captive for months. Authorities say she included an address in her first note where she said that she was being sexually and physically assaulted by a man. 1 week after finding her first note, police rescued her and arrested that man in question. Well, after 10 consecutive days of hiccups, yeah, you heard that right, hiccups, Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro is receiving treatment at a hospital in Sao Paulo. Now, he was diagnosed with an intestinal obstruction Wednesday night, and according to a state-run news agency there, he didn't need emergency surgery, but is receiving ongoing treatment. Now, the controversial leader also tweeted a photo of himself from the hospital. That is my worst nightmare right there. 10 days of hiccups.
Simone, I don't even know what to say, but Bolsonaro has had quite a year, and I think this just tops it all. Oh, my goodness. Wow.
Seriously.
The Department of Justice and Homeland Security teaming up to protect the U.S. from ransomware attacks. They're launching a new website to stop the series of high-profile hacks that have crippled U.S. companies and cost millions of dollars. NBC News correspondent Tom Costello takes a closer look.
Yeah, hey, Allison, good day. Homeland Security behind me really wants everybody to hear this message. Ransomware is the #1 cybersecurity threat, and it's a big threat. It affects individuals, hospitals, police departments, and companies large and small. And so it is now opening up this one-stop shop for people to find out about this threat, to inform, to educate, and empower to protect all of our data. From fuel lines to the food chain, even first responders, ransomware cases up an astonishing 300% this year over last. Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas.
No business is too small to be a victim.
The government is launching a joint effort by Homeland Security and the Justice Department, StopRansomware.gov, a website with resources and tools for companies to help identify, report, and prevent cyber attacks.
What kind of hardcore, tangible assistance can you offer?
We have tremendous cyber expertise. We can assist a company in getting out of the situation that it finds itself in without having to pay the criminal wrongdoers.
Cyber experts say the government plays a critical role in disrupting these often overseas operations.
Private sector does not have the capability to go over to a foreign government and enforce them, encourage them to arrest the actors. The U.S. government has to do that.
Russian-linked cyber criminals now a top national security concern, creating fuel shortages when Colonial Pipeline temporarily halted operations before ultimately paying more than $4 million in ransom. Meat supplier JBS also hit by REvil, a hacker group estimated to have netted more than $120 million in ransom. But this morning, REvil is offline, its online footprint appearing to vanish from the web. That sudden disappearance coming just days after President Biden called on Russia's Vladimir Putin to do something about those cyber hacks.
We expect them to act if we give them enough information to act on who that is.
The Kremlin not taking credit for taking down REvil. The White House and Homeland Security not commenting.
So we're not in a position, Tom, to comment publicly on that today.
It really complicates things when a big hacking group like REvil goes offline, because however that happened, people and companies who are currently involved in negotiations with REvil to get their data back suddenly have nobody to talk to. They're locked out of the process and locked out of their data. The FBI does not recommend paying a ransom, but it acknowledges sometimes companies feel like they simply have no choice. Allison, back to you.
A scathing new report blasting the FBI for, quote, fundamental errors in investigating the sexual assault allegations against former USA Gymnastics team doctor Larry Nassar. The Justice Department report detailing numerous missteps and cover-ups that let Nassar's abuse of dozens of girls and women go on for over a year. NBC News Justice correspondent Pete Williams joining me now from Washington, D.C. Pete, USA Gymnastics first brought the allegations to the FBI in July of 2015, according to this report. But the FBI didn't take any action for more than a year. What was happening during that time?
Well, they did do some things, but what this report says, it was nowhere near enough, that it was failing to realize how urgent a problem this was and how serious it was. When the complaint first came to the FBI's office in Indianapolis, the agents and the U.S. attorneys there, the prosecutors basically were wondering, well, do we have the jurisdiction? Nassar's not here. The U.S. Olympic Committee's elsewhere. Can we really take this case? And they were also concerned about whether, in fact, what he was doing was illegal, because he claimed that it was accepted medical practice. They did interview one victim, a telephone interview, but unfortunately that interview was not at the time ever recorded as a memo, which is standard FBI practice. And the Inspector General says these FBI people didn't tell local authorities. Then 8 months later, another complaint went to the FBI about Nassar in Los Angeles. Now, more work was done there, but again, local authorities weren't told, and no other FBI offices were told. And the Bureau didn't really launch an investigation until nearly a year later, when these allegations against Nassar became public. So what's especially troubling about this is the FBI saying that when an agent who interviewed one of the victims in Indianapolis started to write up a report, 17 months later, it contained a number of misrepresentations. And one of the most disturbing things in the report is that the special agent in charge of the Indianapolis office, while this was all going on, applied for a job with the U.S. Olympic Committee, and then later, when questioned about it by authorities, denied that he did so.
Wow, Pete, there's a whole lot there. This report puts much of the blame on a specific FBI agent who's since retired. What else can you tell us about that agent?
Right, that's Jay Abbott. That's who I was talking about, who applied for the job with the U.S. Olympic Committee. The FBI has a statement about this. They say that the actions, what happened here, never should have happened. It says the FBI will never lose sight of the harm that Nassar's abuse caused. The actions and inactions of certain FBI employees described in the report are inexcusable and a discredit to this organization. And it says the FBI has taken a number of steps to make sure that something like this no longer happens, Allison.
Pete, could Abbott or any of the other agents who are accused of mishandling this investigation, could they be charged with anything here or get in any kind of trouble down the line?
Well, the Inspector General did do what IGs are empowered to do, which is refer the case to the Justice Department for possible prosecution against him and the agent who prepared this report that was full of inaccuracies. But the Justice Department declined to prosecute in both cases.
All right, Pete, some stunning reporting there. Thank you so much for being on with us.
You bet.
In Europe, at least 60 people are dead and dozens are missing. Major flooding sweeping through both Germany and Belgium. NBC News foreign correspondent Claudia Lavanga has more.
Alison, the Chancellor of Germany, Angela Merkel, today said that heavy rain and flooding do not capture what has happened. What has really happened are all those videos coming from the most affected areas by the flooding, especially in Germany, that show these devastating, even apocalyptic scenes of town streets turned into raging rivers, cars being swept away, houses partially or fully submerged in water, entire villages reduced to rubble because the small timber and brick houses could not withstand the sheer force of the flooding, of the water that suddenly came on them, especially carrying all the debris, including, of course, trees. Dozens of people had to be saved from the roofs of their houses by the authorities on either inflatable boats or helicopters. And even though the death toll is already heavy, it is bound to increase because, as Angela Merkel said during her statement and speech today, the authorities do not know how many people actually died already in the flooding because there are so many people still missing. But she said there will be many, and the flooding has affected not only Germany but other countries in Central and Northern Europe, Belgium, Holland, France, Luxembourg. In France, there were enough water for 2 days, equivalent to the usual 2 months of water that fall in that country. And now, while the authorities are trying to deal with the mayhem that this freak weather has caused all across Europe, meteorologists, environmentalists, scientists, not only in Europe but from all over the world, are trying to figure out whether this extreme rainfall, it could be the consequence of global warming and climate change.
It's time for the bottom line, our daily look at what's going on in the business world and beyond. It is Thursday. You know what that means. Weekly jobless claims are out. 360,000 Americans filing for first-time unemployment benefits last week. That is a new pandemic era low. How about that? Plus, inflation, pretty hot topic on Capitol Hill. Fed Chair Jerome Powell talking to lawmakers for a second day in a row. CNBC correspondent Rahel Solomon is here with more on both of those big stories. So, Rahel, let's start with the central bank chief on Capitol Hill. You know I'm a fan of Jay Powell. Let's take a listen to what he told the Senate Banking Committee today.
The challenge we're confronting is how to react to this inflation, which is larger than we had expected or than anybody had expected. And to the extent it is temporary, then it wouldn't be appropriate to react to it. But to the extent it gets longer and longer, we'll have to continue to reevaluate the risks that would affect inflation expectations and will be of a longer duration. And that's what we're monitoring.
So not to simplify it too much, Rahel, but it's pretty much the same thing he said to the House Financial Services Committee yesterday. If it's temporary, we're okay. If it's longer duration, we got to do something. How concerned should everybody be about inflation and the post-pandemic recovery?
Well, Allison, that is the million-dollar question right now. So if Powell is right and the pop in inflation is just temporary, well, the bull market can just keep on charging on. But if inflation turns out to be here to stay, then the Fed will have to raise interest rates to try to cool the economy, bring the economy under control. And rate hikes, well, they're usually bad news for stock investors. It also makes the cost of borrowing higher for pretty much everyone. Think higher mortgage rates, credit card interest rates, and higher car payments. And then when the cost of borrowing goes up, consumers then have less money to spend on discretionary items, such as going out to eat at restaurants, taking vacations, and buying clothes. So, Allison, it becomes a bit of a domino effect, and that's the big concern here.
Yeah. All right, inflation, wrap it up quickly. We have lives to live and things to pay for. Move it along. Rahel, weekly jobless claims dropped to a new pandemic low. Thankfully, we've been saying that quite a bit lately. Good news after last week's numbers were a little bit disappointing. But we're still seeing a worker shortage. What's going on there?
It is a little counterintuitive, right, Allison? And it's a question that a lot of people have been trying to answer, to be honest. How is it that on the one hand, you have 9.5 million Americans who are unemployed, and at the same time, you have many employers, many of whom come on this network, by the way, on CNBC, to say that they cannot find workers? There doesn't seem to be one answer, but the feeling, Allison, is that there are some who have health concerns. It's still a pandemic. We also have the Delta variant causing concerns. You have people currently unemployed who may have issues with childcare. Maybe that'll ease in September when school buildings reopen. And another possible reason, this becomes more of the tricky and perhaps controversial reason, is the enhanced unemployment benefit. Critics of the program have long said the benefit, which they call generous, first an additional $600 a week and then $300 a week. They say that benefit incentivized people to stay home, especially those on the lower end of the pay scale who research has shown some make the same or even more with the enhanced unemployment benefit than they did before. That additional $300 a week program, we should say, it's already been turned off or will soon end in about half of all U.S. states, and it's set to expire in all states in September. Powell, by the way, saying that one, as public health conditions continue to improve and other pandemic-related factors diminish, that job gains should be strong in coming months. So, Allison, it's a question that a lot of people have been trying to answer, but I can say that all eyes in this space are going to be looking to September to see if there's a huge gain in workers after the benefit expires everywhere. Hard to say, though, if we do see the gain, if it's just because of the benefits turning off, because then again, we also have schools reopening. So it's a great question. I wish I had a more simple answer, but those seem to be the factors at play.
Rahel, we hit you with all the $1 million chicken and egg, what's going on questions. You addressed all of them beautifully, but you said it, right? When those benefits stop coming, that might be it. But if kids go back to school, that might be it. We just might never put our finger on exactly what it is. Maybe the answer is it's a combination,
Maybe it's a combination. But what I can say is that because of the worker shortage, people who are going back to work and getting work, they're seeing their wages go up. They're seeing more benefits being offered as employers try to, entice them to come work for them.
Yeah, it is not a terrible time to be looking for a job. There are jobs out there that pay pretty well. Rahel, we always love having you on. Great to see you today. Thank you.
Likewise. Yep.
Facebook paying big bucks to content creators on its social media networks, more than $1 billion through 2022. NBC News senior media reporter Dylan Byers joining me now. So, Dylan, Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg saying investing in creators isn't new for us, but I'm excited to expand this work over time. So what does he mean by expand this work over time? What's Facebook doing? How are they paying out that $1 billion?
Sure. It's just a larger investment. And this is something that every social media company is doing now, be it TikTok, Snapchat, YouTube, basically direct payments to creators, people with followings. And then on top of those direct payments, bonus incentives when they hit certain milestones in terms of how much they use certain features, how many followers that they bring over, how many views they get. And the theory here is pretty simple, which is Facebook faces competition from TikTok, from Snapchat, all of these platforms, especially with younger users. And they're basically saying, hey, come over here, bring your following, bring your fan base over here, and we will reward that. We will reward you for that directly.
So, Dylan, I hate to do this to you because I'm asking all these $1 million questions of people today, but you mentioned TikTok. I mean, during the pandemic, it was hugely popular, tons of eyeballs going that way. Is this enough to help Facebook compete there? I realize that is probably, again, a $1 million question, or $1 billion question, I should say here.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I mean, it's hard because on the one hand, Facebook has incredible scale and no one can really compete with the scale that Facebook has. And that's a very powerful tool. And look, I think especially with young content creators who are trying to make a business on their own out of what they post on social media, direct payments are a huge incentive. Knowing that they're going to be financially rewarded for the work they do is a really big incentive. That said, well, Facebook might have the sway. A company like TikTok has certainly captured the zeitgeist and is certainly a much more popular and I would say sort of sexier app for a certain generation of users. So can Facebook, as the kind of older guard, come in and say, hey, we're cool too, and we're so cool, we're going to pay you this money. Yeah, but look, at the same time, TikTok has done something very similar, and they started out with a $200 million commitment to content creators, and then they realized the demand was so high that they moved it up to $1 billion. So, it's not as though Facebook is the only one throwing money at content creators right now, and I think that's gonna be hard for them. They're probably going to have to continue upping the ante, and TikTok will do the same.
And, Dylan, you bring up a great point, right? Like some of these young people, if you will, who are using TikTok. TikTok makes me feel so old because I'm not super TikTok savvy. But they might roll their eyes at Facebook, right? Because Facebook's maybe not so cool to these content creators. If Facebook's paying as well, if not better, well, maybe Facebook is suddenly more interesting to them. I know you mentioned some of the other social sites, the YouTubes, the Snapchats of the world. What else are they doing to bet on creators? Is it simply they're all just throwing down the cash?
Yeah, I mean, I think cash, there are a few things, actually. Cash is the number one thing, but then you also have the tools. And so TikTok came along and it introduced an entirely new way to create content and really to consume content. And they tapped into something that I don't think users even knew that they wanted, and they created a new way to share that content. I think the question that every social media platform is doing right now is, how do we get ahead of that next great thing? And in the meantime, they're just imitating one another. Facebook imitates whatever TikTok does, whatever Snapchat does. They're sort of using the same tools to try and keep pace with one another. I think the real edge is going to come from new innovations, and that, what that is, we don't even know yet.
It's so funny that you say that, Dylan, because here are some of the world's most innovative companies, if you will. They've changed the way we live, and yet here they are all just copying each other. It is a fascinating space to watch right now. I know that's how you spend your days, so thanks for coming on and sharing all your knowledge.
Sure, thank you.
The war on drugs through the eyes of a 12-year-old 2 decades ago. Her mother was charged with possessing less than 2 ounces of marijuana. Today, the now 30-something woman from New Jersey is fighting for reparations for families damaged by heavy policing in communities of color. NBC News Digital shows us her fight.
I can remember it like it was yesterday, February of 1990. When police stormed our home. When they came in, they were yelling and screaming and pointing guns at us. It was traumatic. It was scary. It was like something out of a movie. The police found marijuana. The next day, my mother turned herself in. Now today, marijuana is legal. Cannabis is legal. And those scars still exist.
Nafisa Goldsmith was 12 years old when the war on drugs approached her doorstep.
America's public enemy number one in the United States is drug abuse.
Marijuana, pot, grass, whatever you want to call it, is probably the most dangerous drug in the United States, and we haven't begun to find out all of the ill effects.
Police officers were being told that they have to target communities, especially black and brown communities. We saw policing at levels that we'd never seen before, and it fueled mass incarceration in our country.
Get on your knees. On my knees. Hands on top of your head.
The war on drugs definitely still exists today.
In 2019, drug offenses were the leading cause of arrests in the country. Over a third of the arrests were marijuana related. 26% of those arrested were black, despite making up less than 14% of the U.S. population, while data shows that black people and white people use drugs at similar rates.
My mother wasn't able to progress economically with employment, nor was she able to get better housing.
Stories like that of Nafisa's family have inspired a movement to challenge lawmakers in states that are legalizing marijuana, to also consider efforts to repair the damage to communities affected by the decades of racially disproportionate marijuana arrests.
Okay, little girl.
New Jersey's bill includes what's called a social equity fee. The 70% sales tax for marijuana revenue will go towards impact zones, cities with large black and brown communities where marijuana laws were most strictly enforced. Other states like New York, Vermont, and Virginia have also proposed social equity fees in their cannabis bills.
We are here to take back our communities. I am demanding that this war on us, this drug war, be abolished. How dare you?
All of the black and brown people who have been incarcerated, who have lost their lives and lost their loved ones, lost the ability to parent their children, the lawmakers have to think about that.
While we were all paying attention to COVID last year, the pandemic was feeding an epidemic, opioids. More than 93,000 people died of drug overdoses last year, a new record, according to the CDC. NBC News senior national correspondent Kate Snow shows us the perfect storm this pandemic created.
Allison, these new CDC numbers really show what we had already been anticipating, unfortunately, which is while we've been focusing on COVID deaths, very quietly, people with substance abuse have been struggling, often isolated, cut off from their support systems. And the numbers now show that we saw a dramatic increase in overdose deaths in the year 2020.
Overdose deaths have been rising for years, but you can see the increase that coincides with COVID. Preliminary data from the CDC shows from December 2019 to December 2020, overdose deaths rose nearly 30%. That's 93,331 deaths last year. Turner Benoit saw it firsthand. He helps families who lack resources find treatment.
The pandemic really created the perfect storm for people in early recovery. We had people that were living in halfway houses, relying on service industry jobs, and attending 12-step meetings every day. All of those things got ripped away, and their link to recovery services were taken away as well.
And services shut down.
Absolutely.
He says government stimulus checks played a role, too.
People use those funds a lot of times to go straight out and get more of the substance that they need.
An increasing supply of deadly fentanyl also drove overdoses. Deaths from fentanyl and other synthetic opioids were up 54%.
It's cheap, it's synthetic, it's easy to make, and it's so lucrative.
Earlier this year, we toured the DEA lab in New York. Users who are dependent on opioids are drawn to fentanyl, but it's also put in counterfeit pills that anyone could buy.
And the danger is if you get too much of the fentanyl, you can die.
You can die.
Ed Ternan's son Charlie died after buying what he thought was a prescription painkiller through a dealer he met on Snapchat. It contained fentanyl.
The drug landscape has changed. It's more like a minefield for our kids, where their next move could be their last.
The Ternan's Foundation helped create new outreach going up on social media, bringing attention back to an epidemic overshadowed for months by COVID.
Those Song for Charlie clips are up on Snapchat now for users to look at. What Ed Ternan is really hoping is that young people get the message that fentanyl is out there and fentanyl is extremely dangerous. Meantime, there's a hope in the community of people who help with substance abuse that as the COVID restrictions lessen, that perhaps more people now who need help will at least be able to find it. Allison.
How far would he go? The nation's top military leader was worried about what President Trump might do to remain in power after the 2020 election. That's according to excerpts from a new book about Donald Trump's final year as president. Its authors saying General Mark Milley was concerned about a military coup. NBC News Pentagon correspondent Courtney Cubie has more.
Allison, we're learning more about some of the behind the scenes. What was going on behind closed doors here at the Pentagon after the election in 2020? Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Mark Milley, was apparently much more concerned about the possibility of President Donald Trump trying to invoke some sort of a coup or invoke the Insurrection Act than he ever let on publicly. In a new book by Washington Post reporters Carol Lenning and Phil Rucker, they detail a number of conversations that General Milley had with some of his senior staff here. At times, he even compared Donald Trump to Hitler and to the way that he was trying to inspire the crowds. General Milley, of course, fancies himself a student of history, so it's not particularly surprising to hear him compare current events to things in the past. But the fact that he would have made, according to these authors, made this comparison is pretty shocking. You know, At the time here, there was a lot of talk about the possibility of Donald Trump doing something, trying to use the military to try and stay in office. And I spent a lot of time talking to military leaders here, very senior people here in the Pentagon, about that possibility, and they were relatively dismissive. They said the military will not be pulled into this, they will not be used in this way. What we now know is there was sort of the more forward-facing conversation, that what I was being told and what they were saying to the public at the time, and what was happening behind the scenes. And that was, they were actually talking about that possibility, and they were actually doing some planning in the eventuality that Donald Trump tried to make some sort of moves, trying to use the military to try and stay in office. Now, we should point out, of course, Allison, that the military is inherently a planning organization. They plan for everything. What we don't know is, during these conversations, did they really think it was going to happen, or were they just talking about that eventuality? That's what we know from here at the Pentagon. What's fascinating to me about the allegations and the revelations in this book, of course, Allison, is that there was what we saw in the public, and that was going on. There was what was going on behind the scenes. Two very different views.
The authors say accounts of private conversations between military and government officials in the book came from several unnamed sources, including aides to those involved. Today, Donald Trump reacting to the book with a statement saying, quote, "I never threatened or spoke about to anyone a coup of our government. So ridiculous. Sorry to inform you, but an election is my form of coup. And if I was going to do a coup, one of the last people I would want to do it with is General Mark Milley." The countdown is on. Athletes flooding Tokyo ahead of the first Olympic events next week. But the surging Delta variant is already changing some of the game's most beloved traditions. And one American athlete is reportedly dealing with a COVID scare. NBC News senior national correspondent Tom Yamas is in Tokyo.
Allison, we're tracking a lot of developing news out of Tokyo. Here, this city has hit a 6-month high when it comes to new infections, so COVID's still very top of mind for everyone here. But the athletes are starting to get excited because competition starts in less than a week. There are a few events that get started before the opening ceremony, so the action's about to get underway.
In Tokyo, getting ready for the games. Baseball, softball, soccer, and artistic gymnastics kicking off competition in just 6 days. As airports filter incoming athletes, Team USA's women's gymnastics team touching down in Tokyo. Before taking off, Simone Biles telling us she's grateful.
It'll be different, but it'll be worth it, and at least we get the opportunity to still compete at Olympic Games.
Still, pandemic reminders on full display. On Wednesday, Tokyo hitting more than 1,100 new cases, the most since January. And this morning, a scare for Team USA's men's basketball team. According to multiple reports, not confirmed by NBC News, NBA star Bradley Beal has been placed under health and safety protocols due to COVID-19.
Bradley Beal, oh, it looked pretty.
Monday night, Beal helped Team USA beat Argentina during exhibition play in Las Vegas, putting 17 points on the board. The AP reporting Beal will now be tested multiple times a day. Unclear what this means for the rest of Team USA and their rivals. Beal has played against 3 countries in the last week. I spoke with Olympics President Thomas Bach about the challenges for the Tokyo Games and asked if he tried to convince Japan's Prime Minister to allow spectators at the events.
When you were informed that there were going to be no spectators, what did you say? Did you lobby to try to get fans back in?
No. Because we set from the very beginning one principle, and this is that, yes, we want to organize these Olympic Games, but we want to organize it in a safe and secure way for everybody.
And a lot of people have been talking about the new medal ceremony in the Tokyo Games. Things are going to be a little different. You may remember from Olympics past someone actually putting the Olympic medal around the athlete's neck. That's going to change this year. They're going to be presented a tray with the medal. The athlete will then put the medal on themselves. They'll be wearing masks. There's no high-fiving or hugging. It is going to be a little different, but no doubt it's still going to be an amazing experience when someone wins that medal.
Hey, NBC News viewers, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here and click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives. Thanks for watching.